Have you ever felt the sting of rejection so deeply that it made you question your own worth? Maybe it was a relationship, a job interview, a friendship, and no matter how much you tried to fix it, the more distant it all became. But what if I told you that rejection is not the end, but the beginning of your power? That every time you were dismissed, overlooked, or ignored, it was life giving you the raw material to create desire, not in others, but first in yourself. What if the key to becoming irresistible was to stop chasing and start standing still, to stop explaining and start observing? You see, Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist and philosopher, believed that the parts of ourselves we hide, deny, or suppress are the very ones that hold our strength. And when we stop begging to be accepted, we become magnetic, not because we're trying to be, but because we no longer need to. Today, we're diving into a radical reframe, how to use rejection to generate desire through the lens of reverse psychology and the philosophy of Carl Jung. This is not about manipulation, it's about power, inner power. The kind that makes you unshakable. The kind that stops people in their tracks not because of what you do, but because of who you've become. So if you've ever asked, why do they pull away when I care the most? Or why does indifference attract more than attention? Stay with me, because what you're about to hear could change the way you see rejection forever. Let's begin this journey. Rejection hurts. There's no way around that. But pain, according to Jung, is often the doorway to transformation. He believed that everything we feel intensely is trying to teach us something we've been ignoring. And when it comes to rejection, it's not just about them. It's about you, about what part of yourself is being triggered, revealed, or projected. Let me explain. When someone rejects you, the immediate instinct is to internalize it. I'm not good enough. I did something wrong. They found someone better. But what if none of that is true? What if their rejection says more about them than it does about you? And more importantly, what if it's showing you a part of yourself you haven't yet accepted? Jung introduced the concept of projection. We see in others what we deny in ourselves. That includes admiration and disgust. Rejection often happens not because you're lacking something, but because your presence touches something in the other person that they're not ready to confront. Your authenticity can be threatening, your vulnerability too raw, your intensity too revealing, and sometimes it's not even that deep. Sometimes people just want what they can't have. Harvard psychologist Dan Wegner once studied what happens when we're told not to think of something like a white bear. What happened? People couldn't stop thinking about it. The same principle applies in relationships. The less accessible you are, the more space you create for curiosity. That curiosity, when nurtured correctly, becomes desire. Rejection, then, can be a mirror. Not of your flaws, but of your untapped potential. It can be the spark that invites you to go inward instead of outward, to ask, what am I learning about myself here? And more importantly, what part of me do I need to embrace so that I never chase what diminishes me again? Rejection isn't your enemy. It's your redirection. There's something almost paradoxical about desire. The more available something is, the less we want it. This isn't manipulation, it's human nature. We're wired to crave what feels scarce, mysterious, or just beyond reach. The psychology of desire isn't about giving more, it's about offering less, with intentionality. Think of the most magnetic people you've ever met. Were they desperate for attention? Were they explaining themselves at every turn? Or did they carry a calm confidence, a sense of self that didn't need validation to exist? That's the secret. When you become less available, you create space for imagination, and imagination is the birthplace of desire. Carl Jung often spoke of the shadow self, the hidden aspects of who we are. But he also believed that repression of those parts leads to suffering. When we suppress our truth to be accepted, we disconnect from the very energy that makes us captivating. The irony, people sense that. They're not drawn to perfection. They're drawn to coherence, to presence, to someone who owns every part of themselves. So what happens when you stop over-explaining, over-offering, over-giving? You become intriguing. And not by accident, but by essence. In the world of marketing, there's something called the scarcity principle, a concept that explains how perceived rarity increases value. The same happens in human relationships. When you're always available, always accommodating, you lose the magnetism of choice. But when you say no with grace, when you disappear to reconnect with yourself, when you guard your energy like it's sacred, that's when people start to lean in, not because you played a trick on them, but because you stopped being predictable. Desire doesn't grow in saturation. It grows in silence, in pauses, in mystery. So the next time you feel the urge to chase, ask instead, what would happen if I leaned back? If I reclaimed my time, my energy, my presence? What you'll find is this: the moment you stop seeking to be wanted is the moment you become unforgettable. People want what they can't fully grasp, what they can't quite figure out. That's the pull of mystery. It's not about being fake or distant. It's about not giving yourself away so quickly, about having depth, layers that aren't accessible to everyone. In a world obsessed with overexposure, mystery has become rare, and what's rare becomes valuable. When you hold back just enough, when you let others wonder, instead of rushing to satisfy every question, you become intriguing. Not vague, not manipulative, just whole. People are naturally drawn to gaps. Our minds want to fill in blanks to solve puzzles. And if you present yourself as someone who doesn't lay everything on the table, you become that puzzle. But here's what matters. You must actually have something worth discovering. Mystery without substance is just a mask. It fades. But when you live with purpose, when your values are clear and your actions are aligned with something deeper, you create a presence that resonates without needing to be explained. Jung taught that much of our attraction to others stems from unconscious recognition, what he called the anima and animus. We project onto others qualities we've buried within ourselves. So when someone seems mysterious, it's often because they're activating something dormant in us, and we crave that activation. Mystery, then, isn't about withholding, it's about embodying. A journalist once described Princess Diana as having an aura of serene sadness, something that couldn't be defined, but could be felt. That's mystery. Not confusion, not aloofness, but emotional gravity. Something in her presence that made people lean in even when they didn't understand why. You don't have to be a public figure to evoke this. You just have to stop explaining yourself. Stop rushing to be understood. Let people discover you in silence, in observation, in space. Because when you become mysterious, not by effort, but by being whole, you stop chasing desire. You become it. We're taught that caring deeply means staying close, that love is proven through constant presence. But here's a deeper truth. Attachment without boundaries becomes dependence. And dependence, whether emotional or psychological, is the fastest way to lose your power. Carl Jung believed that true individuation, the process of becoming whole, requires the integration of opposites, light and shadow, emotion and detachment. You're not here to numb your feelings. You're here to master them. When someone rejects you and you don't collapse, that's power. When someone disrespects you and you don't explain yourself, that's power. When you walk away, not because you don't care, but because you do care about your peace, your value, your self-respect, that's power. Detachment doesn't mean indifference. It means you've stopped begging for connection and started choosing it. It's the realization that your worth isn't up for negotiation, that your silence speaks louder than your defense. When you're emotionally detached, you stop living for reaction. You start living from intention. You respond rather than react. And that shift changes everything. Psychologist Dr. Lisa Firestone once noted that emotional independence increases attraction because it communicates inner stability. And inner stability is irresistible. Why? Because it's rare, because in a world full of chaos and craving, someone who doesn't flinch commands respect. Emotional detachment is not about closing your heart. It's about protecting it. It's about knowing when to lean in and when to lean back. It's about recognizing that some battles don't need your energy, not because you're weak, but because you've evolved. The strongest boundaries are the ones that don't require explanation. They're felt, they're lived, they're embodied. You don't need to slam doors or make grand exits. Just walk quietly and mean it. That energy, that calm departure, is what creates desire in its most potent form, because nothing is more powerful than someone who could react, but chooses not to. We've been conditioned to explain ourselves, to justify every emotion, every boundary, every decision. But here's something no one tells you. The more you explain, the more you shrink. The need to explain often comes from a place of fear. Fear of misunderstanding, of being disliked, of not being enough. But the truth is, people don't need all the details. They need your clarity. And clarity doesn't scream, it whispers. When you stop over-explaining, you leave space for mystery. But more importantly, you begin to trust yourself. You trust that your no is enough. That your silence can speak louder than your story. That your energy doesn't need a disclaimer. Carl Jung once wrote, "You are what you do, not what you say you'll do." That insight hits deep because words without alignment are noise. And you don't need more noise, you need resonance. In relationships, at work, in life, start observing what happens when you stop giving explanations and start holding your line. Watch how people begin to notice the firmness in your tone, the calm in your refusal, the strength in your stillness, and yes, some will be uncomfortable. People accustomed to your compliance might feel threatened by your clarity. But don't dilute yourself to ease their discomfort. Because the more you stand in your truth without explaining it, the more you attract what's aligned with it. This isn't arrogance. It's emotional economy. You're not here to convince everyone of your worth. You're here to be so centered that those meant for you feel it, and those who aren't disappear naturally. The most attractive energy is self-trust. It's not loud, it's not performative, it's still rooted, clear. So stop offering footnotes for your life. Let your decisions speak for you. Let your presence make the statement. When you stop explaining, you stop apologizing for existing. And when that happens, you become undeniable. We've all been taught to hold on, to fight for what we want, to prove we're worthy. But desire doesn't grow in captivity, it blooms in freedom. If you want to be truly wanted, you have to be willing to walk away. Letting go isn't about giving up. It's about giving space. The space for clarity, for self-respect, for someone else to feel your absence and realize your value. Because what is always present becomes invisible. What steps back becomes undeniable. Carl Jung believed that true strength comes from knowing what to release. He spoke often about the necessity of detachment, not as an escape, but as an evolution. To detach is to stop clinging, to stop begging, to stop defining your worth through external validation. When you let go, you remove pressure. And in that release, something powerful happens. You reclaim yourself. You stop contorting to fit into someone else's idea of who you should be. You stop negotiating your essence for attention. You become whole again. The paradox is this: people are drawn to those who are at peace with being alone. It signals emotional maturity. It communicates, I choose you, but I don't need you. And nothing is more magnetic than someone who can love without attachment. A 2018 study published in the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships confirmed that individuals who exhibit secure detachment are rated as more attractive, more trustworthy, and more emotionally stable. Why? Because they aren't performing, they aren't chasing, they're grounded. Letting go also means trusting the process, that what's meant for you will remain, and what isn't will exit, no matter how tightly you hold on. The grip doesn't keep things close. Presence does, clarity does, wholeness does. So instead of asking, how do I keep them? Ask, how do I keep myself? When you become someone who can let go with grace, you create the ultimate attraction, peace. And in a world of noise and neediness, peace is unforgettable. Let go, not to lose, but to be seen again, fully, clearly, desirably. Because when you stop trying to be wanted, that's exactly when you are. At some point, you have to stop chasing and start becoming. The moment you realize that you are the prize, not in arrogance, but in truth, you change the entire dynamic of your relationships, your self-worth, and your emotional energy. People feel it when you know who you are. It's not loud, it's not showy, it's quiet certainty. It's the way you walk into a room without needing to be noticed, but still are. That's presence, and presence is the product of self-ownership. Carl Jung believed that when we integrate our unconscious patterns, when we face the parts of ourselves we once ran from, we reclaim lost power. And that power, when embodied, becomes magnetism, because it's no longer borrowed, it's owned. Being the prize doesn't mean being superior. It means being sovereign, knowing your time, your energy, your love. They're all valuable. Not everyone gets access. Not everyone deserves it. And when you operate from that place, you naturally filter out those who were never meant to stay. You start attracting people who aren't looking for entertainment, but connection, who don't want to consume you, but to understand you, because you no longer try to prove yourself, you just are. There's a study from the University of Toronto that found individuals with high self-concept clarity, meaning they know who they are, experience greater satisfaction in relationships, and are perceived as more emotionally attractive, not because of appearance, but because of alignment. You can't fake being the prize. It's not about pretending, it's about remembering. Remembering who you were before the world convinced you that you had to earn love, before you believed you had to hustle for validation. You are not a product to be sold, you're a presence to be felt. So act like it, speak less, mean more, show up selectively, give without expectation, but never from depletion. And above all, stop convincing anyone of your worth, because the real prize never begs to be chosen. It chooses itself and lets others catch up. Most people spend their lives reacting, waiting to be chosen, seen, validated. But what if you flipped the script? What if, instead of wondering who wants you, you started asking, who do I want to let in? This simple shift changes everything, because suddenly you're no longer auditioning. You're discerning. You're no longer the seeker, you're the chooser. Carl Jung taught that we unconsciously repeat patterns until we make them conscious. And if your pattern has been to chase attention, affection, recognition, then reversing the role isn't just a new behavior. It's an act of awakening. The moment you stop trying to be the exception for someone who can't see your value and start becoming the standard for what you allow into your life, you elevate your frequency. You stop waiting to be selected, and you become the one who selects. People can feel this shift. It's not aggressive, it's not defensive, it's composed. It's the quiet confidence of someone who knows they are not for everyone and doesn't need to be. When you walk into a room and your energy says, "I know who I am," people notice. Not because you're loud, but because you're clear. And clarity is rare. A report from the Journal of Personality found that individuals who express selective social engagement are perceived as more self-assured and emotionally attractive. Why? Because their attention isn't scattered, it's intentional. Their presence isn't desperate, it's deliberate. Reverse psychology isn't about playing games. It's about breaking cycles, about recognizing that your approval is just as valuable as anyone else's and should be treated that way. So, stop handing out front row seats to people who haven't earned them. Start observing who leans in when you lean back. Start paying attention to who respects your absence, not just your availability. You don't have to chase to be loved. You just have to choose yourself so fully that anyone who enters your space has no option but to rise to your level or walk away. Reverse the role, not to win, but to reclaim the power you never should have given away. There's something incredibly powerful about silence. Not the awkward kind, but the kind that speaks. Before you do, the kind that fills a room with gravity, with presence, with confidence. In a world that can't stop talking, the one who knows when to stay quiet becomes unforgettable. Silence isn't weakness, it's restraint, and in restraint, there's control. Jung understood this deeply. He saw the unconscious as a vast ocean beneath the surface of our everyday words and actions. And silence, when used intentionally, connects us to that depth. When you stop rushing to reply, to fix, to explain, you shift the power dynamic. You no longer react. You respond if and when it's needed. And often, the silence says it all. Tells others you're not playing their game, that you won't be provoked, that you've mastered the most dangerous skill of all, self-control. Psychologist Albert Mehrabian's research on communication reveals that the majority of impact comes not from what we say, but how we carry ourselves. Tone, facial expression, posture, and, yes, our stillness. When you speak less, every word carries more weight. When you pause, people lean in. The silent magnet doesn't need validation. They don't chase attention. Their allure is in their calm, their focus, their refusal to overexpose. Think of the most magnetic people you've met. They likely didn't tell you everything. They left room for mystery, for interpretation, for reflection. That's not manipulation, it's maturity. When you don't rush to fill the space, you let your energy do the talking. And energy is never confused. People feel when someone is rooted, centered, unshakable. So the next time someone tries to trigger you, tempt you, or test your boundaries, pause. Don't give them what they expect. Let them sit in your silence. Let them wonder. Let them realize that not everyone reacts. Some people simply decide, and that decision made without a word often speaks louder than any argument ever could. Be the silent magnet, not because you're afraid to speak, but because you no longer need to. There comes a moment in every transformation when the shift is no longer about the external world, but about how you see yourself. When you stop asking if you're enough and start deciding that you are the measure, you don't wait to meet the standard. You become it. Carl Jung believed that individuation, the process of becoming your true self, required confronting not only your shadows, but also your potential. And potential is terrifying because it demands responsibility. When you accept that you are the standard, you can no longer hide behind excuses. You have to live it. But here's the beauty. Once you live it, everything changes. People start treating you the way you treat yourself. When you set the bar high, not in perfection but in self-respect, others have only two options: rise up or fall away. And either outcome is a blessing. You stop negotiating your boundaries. You stop diluting your needs. You stop giving passes to people who haven't earned them. Because now you're not trying to impress. You're maintaining alignment. A study from the University of California, Berkeley, found that individuals who consistently reinforce personal standards, especially in romantic relationships, experience greater long-term satisfaction and fewer instances of regret. Why? Because self-respect sustains what charm can't. Being the standard doesn't mean being rigid, it means being rooted. You're flexible where it counts, but unshakable in what matters. Your time, your values, your peace, they're not up for debate. You no longer ask, will they like me? Instead, you ask, do they reflect the life I've committed to? Because when you are the standard, you don't chase. You observe. You don't beg. You invite. You don't settle. You wait. And the ones who recognize your value won't just want to be near you. They'll want to rise with you. So raise the bar, not out of pride, but out of clarity. You've worked too hard to shrink back now. You've walked through rejection, silence, detachment, and choice, not to become smaller, but to become precise. You are the standard. Live like it. If you've made it this far, you already sense something stirring inside, a quiet knowing, a recognition that maybe, just maybe, you've been handing your power to people, situations, and stories that no longer deserve it. And that ends now. You're not here to be everyone's favorite. You're not here to be easy to reach, easy to consume, easy to forget. You're here to live with intention, with clarity, with magnetism. Carl Jung once said that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. That path isn't loud. It's not about proving. It's about being. It's about reclaiming your boundaries, your voice, your energy. You don't have to convince anyone. You don't have to chase anyone. You just have to choose yourself, daily, quietly, and without apology. Because the one who no longer reacts, who no longer explains, who no longer waits for permission, that one becomes undeniable. And that's who you're becoming. So the next time rejection knocks, remember, it's not the end. It's an invitation to go deeper, to stand taller, to speak less and mean more. This isn't the art of manipulation. This is the art of mastery. Self-mastery. You don't attract by shouting your worth. You attract by living it. Thank you for walking this path with me. If this message resonated with you, if it lit a fire, even a small one, subscribe to the channel. Leave a like and share it with someone who needs it. And if you're ready for your next step in personal power, tap on the video that's appearing now. Stay magnetic, stay mysterious, and most of all, stay true to you.